Hey there everyone, this is Bob Martin, the RCSubGuy with the NautilusDryDocks.com, and today's going to be a little bit different. You'll notice I'm not in the shop and I don't have a boat that I've been working on in the background because today I'm going to do something that I probably should have done ages ago, and I'm going to go through frequently asked questions about the RC submarine hobby. Now I get emails, phone calls, and questions from people from all over the world asking me about how to get into the hobby. And hopefully this video will outline some of the commonly asked questions that people are asking, or perhaps more importantly, that they should be asking themselves. So without any further delay, let's get started. So before you even think about dropping thousands of dollars on these incredible remote controlled vehicles, you need to understand a few things. Just because you want to get into it does not mean that you should. Now don't get me wrong, I'll happily take your money, but if you're looking for enjoyment, you need to make sure that you do some legwork first. RC submarines are a hobby for the elite. And what I mean by that, and many of you will have heard me say this before, is this is very much unlike RC cars, RC boats, or even to a certain degree, RC helicopters, in that there is a massive amount of engineering, problem solving, foresight, and many other things that are going to need to be in place for you to successfully create, maintain, and operate an RC submarine. Number two, RC submarines are not by any stretch of the imagination cheap. And I'll get into that in a little bit for the frequently asked questions, but unless you've got several $1,000s earmarked for this hobby, probably not for you. And what I mean by that is, do I understand how a radio works, how it talks to the model? Do I understand the basics of servos, electronic speed controllers, the different types of motors? So basic core things that you need to understand before you even think about moving forward. Number two, do I have the basic skills needed? And what I'm talking about there are basic electrical skills. Do I understand how an electrical circuit works? Do I understand soldering? Do I have a rotary tool and do I know how to use it? Do I understand the fundamentals of filling, painting, and priming? Fabrication skills are also going to be very important because unlike cars or boats that come out of the box basically ready to go, you need to build things in order to finish out your model kit. And to me, this is a big one because it actually is one of the things that concerns me the most about the hobby. The world that we live in now is one filled of instantaneous gratification, and people want that. Open the box, take it out, charge up the batteries, and go to the pond. And unfortunately, it just does not work like that. I would say on average, a first build could take in excess of 200 hours of work, depending on the kit that you've got and your skill level. Certainly, over 100 hours, I'd say, would be very, very reasonable. So if you're not prepared to be sitting in front of the workbench for that amount of time, and not just work time, but research time, this is not your hobby. Okay, a few more things that you need to make sure that you have in your head before you start moving forward. And the first one is be realistic. What I mean by that is everybody, when they reach out to me for their very first RC submarine, want it to shoot missiles. and torpedoes and have working periscopes and sound systems and lighting systems because it's so cool. Be realistic. This is your first build. Every subsystem that you add to a basic RC submarine exponentially increases the overall difficulty of the build and the likelihood that any one of those subsystems will fail at any given time. So, my advice, your first boat, make it simple. The KISS principle. Have it operate reliably. That is the key. After you have that nailed down, then you slowly move forward with all of the other fun bells and whistles that you can add to a remote controlled submarine. Second thing, find a trusted vendor. And being a vendor, I may be somewhat non-objective when I'm talking here, but what I mean by that is make sure that whomever you are reaching out to will not just sell you stuff, but has the background, information, knowledge, and capability to continue to support you through your RC submarine building journey. This is important because it is going to be hard. There's no other way to put it. It is going to be a difficult journey, and without that partner there beside you, you're going to struggle quite a bit. Next piece of advice, pick a good starter kit. Again, going back to the bells and whistles, a submarine that is 9 feet long, that features computerized ballast control and automated fail-safe systems and subsystems, probably not your best boat. Go for the simple, reliable construction, likely a modern boat with a basic hull shape that will get you in the water soon with a minimum amount of fuss and frustration. So pick a good kit to start. Have fun. If you do not view this as a learning experience and an opportunity to challenge yourself, you are going to have the most frustrating experience of your life. So be prepared to invest the time, but also be prepared to learn a lot of amazing skills, meet some amazing people, and build an amazing craft at the end of the day. All right, time for those frequently asked questions that I talked about a little bit earlier on. And these are the questions that I get over and over again, both in person and via email and on the forums. So if you already know the answers to these, just kind of sit back, chill, and enjoy the answers. But I'm going to go through them for anybody who is just getting into the hobby fresh and does not understand anything about them. So there are a few different underwater craft that people may consider to be RC submarines, but for the sake of the hobby that I deal with, I'm talking primarily about scale models. That being miniature representations of full-sized craft, typically military vessels, historical in nature. But you can get into fun stuff too, like fantasy submarines such as the Nautilus from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or sci-fi submarines like the Sea View from Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. RC submarines will submerge in a couple of different ways, but the key is they do submerge. It's the difference between a target and a boat being a submarine, a true operational craft, those targets, surface targets, being limited to 2 dimensions of travel on the surface of the water. This goes back to that statement I made earlier talking about this being a hobby for the elite. The thing that I love about this is the parallel between the scale submarine world and the true submarine world. You can't see a full-scale submarine until it's too late as well. Just like that, these scale model submarines are fun to drive around at the lake or pond, fully submerged, people not fully understanding or seeing them until they breach the surface right where they're least expected. The actual operation of the submarine is a skill that takes a lot of practice, again, leading back to that elite operation that I talked about earlier. It is fun, and certainly as the operator, you know where your boat is. You can track it on the surface. You know what to look for in terms of the periscope or the wake that it leaves on the surface. So there's a lot of point to an RC submarine. You just got to be the guy driving it. So there is a couple of different ways that RC submarines submerge. The most simplest version being what's called a dynamic diver. Now, these dynamic divers have no ballast system. They have the benefit of being exceptionally simple. You basically ballast the boat so it's just barely positively buoyant. And then the forward movement of that boat through the water in conjunction with the operation of the dive planes pulls the boat underneath the water and you're submerged. Benefit to this is it's extremely safe. If anything goes wrong, you take your hands off the controls and eventually it floats back to the surface. Unfortunately, the drawbacks to this system is that typically your control surfaces need to be a little bit oversized or certainly large on the original subject in order to have an enjoyable operational experience. And of course, the second thing being that when it is floating on the surface, you can't really see it because most of it is underneath the water. The second way of submerging an RC submarine is what's called static diving. And basically, these submarines take on ballast through various different means, different ballast system technologies to become heavier. They sink, become negatively buoyant or neutrally buoyant, do their submerged patrol, and then blow ballast, purge out the water that they took on earlier, come back up to the surface and up to their full surfaced water line. So that's the basics of RC submarine operation. This is a little bit of an odyssey that's going on right now in the hobby, but to put it simply, low frequency radio waves actually penetrate water rather well, particularly fresh water. So the older hobby frequencies in North America being 75 megahertz and over in Europe and other parts of the world being 40 megahertz will penetrate water to quite a good extent, certainly enough to enjoy the operation of an RC submarine. The range that you get is a function of the distance away and how deep the boat is, but also what is in the water. And what I mean by that is chemicals, minerals, or biological contamination. The more you have of that, the less chance that signal has of penetrating the water, reaching your boat in a clean enough manner for it to operate properly. Of course, the thing to think about that is that salt water being highly concentrated with minerals does not allow those radio waves to penetrate and unfortunately doesn't work. It's an old RC submarine operator's answer that it will go all the way to the bottom. It's getting to come back up again. That's the challenge. Typically, RC submarines operate at periscope depth or slightly shallower, but they are capable of going much deeper depending on the design of the waterproof compartment. I have personally operated my RC submarines to depth in excess of 20 feet without any catastrophic failures. Of course, at that depth, you can't really see them or operate them in a fun manner, but they're certainly capable of getting down there. The speed of an RC submarine is really dependent upon the design of the boat, how hydrodynamically efficient the hull is, and the propulsion system that's installed in it. That could range anything from a slow walking pace to a sprint in some cases, sufficient enough to propel the submarine completely out of the water if it is aligned in such a manner. But for the most part, what you'll see, they'll operate in a fairly scale-like manner, getting up to a fast walking pace in most cases. Again, bear in mind, most of these RC submarines are scale in nature, being small representations of the large boats. And so seeing them hydroplane across the water is not something that most operators want in their RC submarines. Now, this is also another one where I think people have a lot of misconceptions. I get a lot of emails from people saying, I would like to get into the hobby of RC submarines and I would like to spend $300 to do so. And I promptly tell them that this is the wrong hobby for them. Unfortunately, it's an expensive hobby. And like I said earlier, we can go into that a little bit here right now. Everything is about economies of scale. And because this is a small hobby, things are manufactured basically to order by the few vendors that are out there in the marketplace. And when you're building things one at a time or even 10 at a time, your economies of scale are not very large. So your costs are high, profits are low. So therefore, the costs of everything to do with the RC submarine hobby are quite high. Now, there's some exceptions out there. There's some Chinese manufacturers out there that are making large-scale production of certain types of RC submarine hulls. You gotta watch the quality, but some of them are pretty good, and you have to deal with overseas manufacturers. But for the most part, when you get yourself an RC submarine hull, it was handcrafted painstakingly by a craftsman, likely in their garage or workshop, just for you. So that is why things are so expensive. And if you want to know how expensive, I would say realistically, you need to budget a minimum of $1,000 at this point of time to get started. More realistically, for a comprehensive kit of any sort of scale, you're going to be closer to $1,500, perhaps $2,000, and it only goes up from there. Bear in mind, that is just the cost of the hull and components. That is not a completed RC submarine. You still got to put it together. If you're looking for turnkey, you're going to start at $3,000, and it will go up from there. Absolutely, people have done it. They have done some amazing things. I will say one thing about this hobby: it is typically filled with exceptionally talented individuals, most of whom come from a professional or engineering background, and so they know a lot of cool stuff. So torpedoes, either gas-powered, electric-powered, certainly possible in many scales. Missiles, certainly possible. Air-powered, water-powered, gas-powered, or in the case of certain ones, actually solid rocket propellant powered. There's even some crazy Australians out there who have used exploding versions of both, but certainly that's nothing that I have had privy to mess around with here in the land of litigation. So, possible, yes. Complicated, yes. Dangerous, possibly, but still very, very cool. Really, your imagination, budget, time, talent, or contacts is the only thing that is limiting you from putting almost anything that you can think of into an RC submarine. As we mentioned before, torpedoes and missiles are very common. Operational periscopes, operational torpedo doors, lights, sound, almost anything that you can think of. The cool thing that I'm seeing now is, and that I'm getting excited about, is the idea of automation. So you can get these models doing things autonomously, such as self-navigating, or in some cases relaying information back to the operator. At this point, I want to talk about video. Video is absolutely possible as well, but you need to understand that wireless video has a limitation in that it is typically broadcast at high frequency. If you were paying attention earlier, you will recall that high frequency does not penetrate water. So unfortunately, true wireless video where you can sit at shore and drive your submarine underneath the water while seeing what it's seeing is not currently something that is feasible unless you tether your boat to shore utilizing a cable. That's not exceptionally awesome because it can get tangled, it affects the performance of your boat, and other RC craft can get tangled in it during operation, but if you have to have it, you can get it. What I prefer to do is record high definition video on board the submarine, drive it around normally, and then download it back ashore, viewing it in full HD splendor. It's going to be something that's going to happen to you one day or the next when you run an RC submarine for a while. You basically eyeline where you last saw it, take a guess at where it might be, and you search. A few different ways of searching. You can use RC boats or drones to patrol the water with a video system. You can use a snorkel and swim around. You can walk around and feel with your feet, or you can just accept the loss and move on to other projects, which would be tragic, but unfortunately does happen from time to time after the aforementioned procedures took place unsuccessfully. Now, there are electronic modules that can be added to RC submarines called fail-safes that can help mitigate this, and they operate in a few different ways. If a signal is lost, they can automatically blow ballast and bring the submarine up to the surface. There's also some that will automatically release a buoy either after loss of signal or after a prescribed length of time, so that you will see this buoy float to the surface, tethered to the submarine via a fishing line, for example, and you can retrieve your boat that way. So there are options if that submarine does end up out of your line of sight and lost. And trust me, that is not a good feeling, but you need to experience it at least once if you're going to be a true RC submarine driver. Well, there you go, everyone. The video is not filled with amazing RC submarines, but hopefully was filled with a bunch of important information for you if you're just starting out in the hobby. I, of course, am more than happy to answer any other questions that you may have concerning RC submarines. I love this hobby and I would love to hear from you. Feel free to drop me an email anytime at bob@rc-sub.com or message me through my website at nautilusdrydocks.com. I got an interface there. You can just type your question right in and it'll come to me. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Again, this is Bob Martin, the RC Sub Guy with the nautilusdrydocks.com. Thank you for joining me, and we'll catch you next time.